And what we heard in the acupuncture school is that, here is the 5-element theory, and they explain everything, but then we are going to base our treatments in the, just in the, how can I say in English?
You can say it in Portuguese if you want.
um, the 8 principles, syndromes treatment, the 8 principles. Syndromes, are you familiar with this wording? Treatment by syndromes.
Yes.
So that's what we heard in the school. Oh, there is this 5-element theory. It's beautiful, but to really treat our patients, let's forget about this and work just with syndromes, the 8 principles. If it's weak or strong, if it's deficient or excess, if it's heat or cold, all that, and
Now,
then so
are you
yeah, so
are you
yes, you're right.
are
Uh-huh.
you are you talking about the 8 extraordinary vessels?
No, no, no.
No.
Um, be, let me research in
Sure.
English. Treatment by syndromes. So what are these syndromes? For example, the
Ec-
fish,
Deficiency,
the
excess,
deficient, excess, heat, uh, coldness, dryness, humidity,
phlegm.
mucosidade, phlegm, exactly. All this kind of treatment based just to taking this information into consideration and not the 5-element theory.
Right. In the book, do you see that chapter on weather, the climate?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So um, in the book, I have that chapter on cold and hot and how it moves through the 6 elements, and then light and heavy and how they move through the 6 elements. And the other one is wet and dry and how they move through the 6 elements. So the 8 principles are basically hot and cold, wet and dry, heavy and light, combined with excess and deficiency. So the 8 principles really are 6 elements, either in excess or in deficiency. And that's just how they're going to change. When you look at the 6 elements, they're in balance. There's no excess or deficiency. But then all of a sudden, one begins to go into excess and the other goes into deficiency, and then we have 8. Then we have to add 2 principles to get 8, just to describe the 6.
I see your point.
And phlegm is basically just heaviness with some water producing some heat. And as you begin to understand that process of creating phlegm, you can see how the spherical pattern can create phlegm by looking at where the heat is, where the water is flowing, and where the earth can block that and create phlegm.
I see. Yes. Now it gets much more sense. Yeah, because it's very strange to me when I was having that classes and they showed us the 5-element theory, and then okay, so this is just for you to know, but then to really practice acupuncture, let's consider the 8 principles, and then nothing to do with 5-element theory. So yeah,
But it has
so
everything.
really
It has
much.
everything to do with five element theory and six element theory. It is five element theory or element theory. It is the eight principles. Just either excess or deficiency. You're looking for excess and deficiency in the elements. That's basically all it is. The five element theory has a lot of limitations that it can't see clearly enough into the meridian structure of the body to really describe what is going on. So that's why you when you see the spherical pattern where you have all of the elements flowing and the opposite meridians on the sphere are your six divisions. And then you can separate the yin elements from the yang elements like we see here. You begin to see that everything you need to know about meridian theory, about meridian problems, is right here in this spherical structure. The eight principles, the six divisions, all of the co-cycles, the Shen cycles, and also a lot of other specific little details to meridian theory. You'll see them inside this spherical structure. And you'll never, ever see those inside the five element theory. It's just too simple. It's too limited. So you open it up. It's like you take that five element and you make it flower. And then you can begin to see how everything connects specifically, and that's the spherical flow. This is advanced. What level of acupuncture are you in?
Um, I'm yeah, I'm studying. I still have 1 year to finish the course, to complete the course.
This is going to this if you study six elements and study the spherical pattern here, it's going to really help you understand so much so easily.
Yes, that's my goal. I'm yeah. When I first saw your videos, because I knew you first watching your YouTube videos, and then uh, this really came to satisfy something that was difficult to me, because I was watching all the this information, but there was not really good connections to, for example, have combine all the symptoms and okay, which meridians exactly I need to work. And then I saw a lot of people just memorizing specific points for specific symptoms. So in the end, they were not treating the patient as like a holistic uh, treatment, like a single treatment to specific to the patient. They was just okay. So for headache, we have good points. This, and that. For stomach ache, we have good points. This, and that. And then no, but what about these? the the Chinese principle, the Chinese teachings, not just good specific points for specific symptoms.
It's like, see if you can see that. Oops. I'm putting a little circle around the stomach, if I can. Well, let's make it a different color. Okay. So here we put a circle around the stomach. Let's say you have symptoms for like a stomach ache. And you say, okay, there's certain points you're going to use. And you use those points every time for a stomach ache because the stomach meridian seems to have a problem. But you go into this spherical flow and just sit there where stomach is and look around. You've got heart over here, you've got liver behind it, bladder over here, lung and sanjiao, and all these meridians are close by it. And you think, a stomach ache could have so many different causes. Maybe it's the bladder, maybe it's the heart, maybe it's the liver, maybe it's the sanjiao, maybe it's the lung. And there's so many, and each of those connections might be an excess or a deficiency, creating a stomach ache. And so it becomes very easy. You just sit there in stomach and say, okay, I know the problem is in stomach. So then you just sit there on the stomach in the spherical flow, and you look around and you think, what other meridian near me could be creating a problem? Is it the heart? Because the heart on the spherical flow feeds into, if you can see that, the heart will feed into the stomach. It's like fire to earth, basic. So is it the heart meridian acting upon the stomach, giving it too much heat? Maybe. But then maybe it's the liver. You come over here and the liver is also feeding into the stomach. Maybe it's that wood energy rising through the body, interrupting with the stomach flow and making it queasy. Okay, that's one possibility. But then maybe it's sanjiao. Sanjiao sits right there balancing the stomach. And maybe the body's just not in a homeostatic balance. The emotions are offset, the person's anxious. And so the sanjiao controlling the hypothalamus in the brain makes the person worried and anxious, and that has an effect on their stomach. And maybe they get a stomach ulcer because the sanjiao is worried about life and it's out of balance because the person thinks, my life is not right, something is wrong. And that will affect the stomach maybe through the sanjiao. And then there's another relationship too, where the stomach wants to flow to the bladder. The stomach is supporting the bladder, earth supporting metal. And maybe that particular connection between stomach and bladder, maybe that's the problem causing the stomach ache. So do we see symptoms in the bladder? Is there a nervousness? Is there urination? Is there a weakness in the ability to coordinate the body? Is there a breathing problem? Things like that. And you think, is the bladder creating a problem with the stomach? So then all of a sudden, you're sitting at stomach, and sitting around you are 5 meridians. Heart, liver, sanjiao, lung, and bladder. Those 5 meridians are just sitting around the stomach. Now you have your own little 5-element theory sitting around the stomach. You can, it's like taking a magnifying glass on stomach, and around it are 5 elements, 5 meridians. And you can say, okay, I have a 5 meridian theory just for the stomach. Tell me if you understand.
Yes.
Are you
Yes.
are you able to visualize that?
Yeah, I'm following. Yes. Uh-huh.
I guess an easy way to look at that is to say, let's say you're up here at heart, and you've got these 5 blue meridians sitting around it. So it's like the heart sits in this little 5-element structure, but it's really just 5 meridians sitting around heart. And it kind of looks like a 5-element theory thing, like a 5-element star, but it's not. It's 6 elements that looks like 5-element theory. So you can say, okay, I think the problem is in the heart. Well, the first thing you do is look around it. Gallbladder, spleen, liver, stomach, and bladder. These 5 meridians that kind of surround it. And you think, okay, what's going on here? It's always like this. Let me see if I can get this. I'm going to show you what it always looks like. Okay, tell me if you can see that. That there's 2 arrows going into heart and 2 arrows coming out of heart. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Like the five uh, ele 5-element theory of mother and son, right? Mother feeding and the element feeding the son, and then there is the control. If it is one before the mother, will control the son. Yes, I see that.
So in the spherical flow, for each meridian, there's 2 meridians that feed into it. And then that particular meridian, like heart, then that feeds into 2 other meridians. You'll see that with every single meridian. So you can begin to ask yourself that the energy is flowing from gallbladder and spleen to heart. And then from there, the energy is flowing to liver and stomach. And so you
And
think, go ahead.
to identify which one is has the problem, you just consider the amount of symptoms, which one has a higher amount of symptoms related.
Exactly. You can say, okay, in this particular person, it's probably the spleen. You can find some symptoms. Let me point out something here. In the spherical flow, the gallbladder will go to the spleen. See that? Gallbladder flows to the spleen, and then gallbladder and spleen both flow to the heart. So there's a general movement from the gallbladder to spleen and heart, and ultimately to heart. And maybe the spleen is weak because the spleen receives the gallbladder energy. For example, the spleen is the body, and the gallbladder is like the sun in the sky. If a person stays out in the sun too long, the spleen will get weak because the gallbladder represents that sun's light, that sun's heat. And if we start trying to absorb too much of it, the spleen will get weak because we tried to absorb too much gallbladder. And then that will have an effect on the heart.
Because then spleen will not support heart well enough.
Spleen is having to deal with all this gallbladder energy coming in. And it can't balance out the heart because it has too much gallbladder that it's trying to absorb. And then, so we'll see a symptom of fatigue and tiredness and dizziness from being out in the sun too long. And then we begin to see some heart symptoms, part of that dizziness, the sunstroke. the heartbeat, the loss of fluids affecting the heart. So we can see that little process there. And then from the heart, it'll flow to the liver and the stomach, which is building the blood in the body. So that fire is building the energy in the blood, which is then going to nourish the stomach, which are the tissues of the body. So if I can bring this one over, we'll see liver flow to stomach. So just from this one angle, you'll see arrows going from gallbladder through spleen, heart, and liver, eventually to the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea here is that the sun's energy is being manifested in matter. And we can see the process, these little steps that it has to go through spleen, heart, and liver to build the foundation to create matter.
I see.
And so if somebody has a stomach ache, or they just don't seem to have good muscle tone, something in that process is not healthy. It may go all the way back to the gallbladder. Maybe there's just too much gallbladder or not enough gallbladder, deficiency, excess. Because the gallbladder is feeding into that whole system, which is building the stomach.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we go back to your original question, how do you begin to see these things in the spherical pattern? Where do you start? I mean, how do you know where to go within the spherical pattern? You begin to see these different areas of the spherical pattern are creating different things in the body. It's like each little area of the spherical pattern is its own little physiological process. And they all get connected, but you can break it down into little sections, like we did with the kidney and the ears. That the pericardium is flowing through the kidney to the sanjiao. And that's an energy that's going through the ears and parts of the brain and over the top of the head and going back down through the spine. Something in there is not in balance. And all it is a certain section, that lower section of the spherical pattern. And then when we go up top to the heart, we see there's another little pattern creating around the heart. And different symptoms we're going to see up there with the stomach, spleen, gallbladder, and liver. Earth and wood symptoms being centered around the heart. And it's just a matter of understanding that little physiological process of energy creating matter, or really being transformed into matter. And so you begin to see how the energy flows. You can imagine just the energy flowing around the spherical flow and through it and around it in different patterns. But every time the energy passes through a different meridian, it takes on a different expression. It's like stomach is fixed earth, solid earth. It's heavy. And so as this energy from liver, which is kind of light and free and flowing and energetic and optimistic, flows and it's feeling good. And as that energy from liver starts to pass through the stomach, it gets this heaviness, this seriousness to create matter. But it's just taking that energy from liver and giving it a purpose. Just going to build something. But then the energy doesn't stay there in the stomach. It's creating the stomach expression, but then continues to flow beyond it to the lung. The lung is like Libra, the zodiac sign Libra. You're developing your relationships. Now that you've got this substance, now you're going to give it form. You're going to give it a style. You're going to give it class, charisma. You're going to give it something. You're going to color it. You're going to give it a design. You're going to make it look good. You know, you look at just stomach, the uncarved block, it doesn't have much personality. And then I'm going to have to copy another one of these. And then you see the stomach will flow into the lung. So that energy is flowing from liver, and then it gets brought down into a substance of the stomach. And then as the energy begins to flow through that stomach, you go to the surface and you begin to like carve. Do you know that word carve?
Mm-hmm.
You begin to carve and give it a design, a form. Maybe you want to take that substance and create a chair. So you cut it, move it, and all of a sudden you have a chair. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
substance. It's the same substance, but now it has a form that we can recognize. And so that energy moved through the stomach, and as it began to express, it created that substance into a form. And so as you move around the spherical flow, you see the story of creation, of each
Yes.
particular step in creating form, and then movement, and then life, and then balance, and then a belonging. And you just sit there and you walk around the spherical flow and you can see that pattern of creation. And the beauty of it is we can use that for acupuncture.
Yes. And the initial point would be the element seed, right? Which is the potential for everything to exist.
Um, the initial seed, there's the element seed, and then there's the power of creation, which is creating the seed. That power of creation basically takes heart and kidney, fire and water, creates this structure around them where there's cones, and then these two cones come together to create the spherical pattern. And then in that moment of coming together, all of the elements begin to form. Seed element is a yang element. It has a job to do. It has to balance everything. And it's an active process to keep things in balance, to keep things optimized, like in homeostasis. And so seed depends on all of the other meridians just as much as the other meridians depend on seed. So the seed is not really at the center, but it takes on this role, of having to coordinate the activity of the other meridians, like the endocrine system, the hypothalamus, having to coordinate and balance the physiology of the body and of the emotions. So seed is very important to understand the endocrine system, 2,000 years ago, no one knew what the endocrine system was. They could not open up a body and find where those organs were. They could see the stomach, they could see the heart and the lungs and the intestines, the spleen and the liver, kidney. They could see all those organs. And then it came down to Sanjiao. Where's the Sanjiao? Is there an organ there? They couldn't see it. It was too
Yeah.
small. It's just this little tiny circle, little tiny seed thing at the base of the brain. They didn't see it. They didn't know what it did. There's no function it has. They couldn't recognize it as something different. But they knew the energy was flowing through that area, but they couldn't identify an organ. And so it became, Sanjiao was like function without form. They couldn't see it. They couldn't see the organ, so it didn't have a form. But then 2,000 years pass and we can say, okay, here's the hypothalamus. Now the function has a form. Now we can see it. The Sanjiao really does have a form. It's called the hypothalamus because now we can identify it. Back then they couldn't, but now we can. So when they teach in 5-element theory that Sanjiao is function without form, that's the past. Now in the future, we don't have to say that. We know its function and now we know its form. So in many ways, acupuncture has to go through an evolution. There's still things that it's learning and redefining as it becomes to know more.
Yes. Hmm. Yes, I agree.
So as you study 6 elements, you'll see a lot of power in this, a lot of simplicity. It looks complex, but it's really not. It's just a simple process of creation, of just taking one little step at a time through the spherical flow and seeing what's happening. From liver to stomach, we see that wonderful energy in the blood flowing around the body, building tissue. It's simple to understand that little relationship between liver and stomach. And then between stomach and lung, well, that deep tissue begins to form skin, the boundaries of cells, the boundaries of skin, the mucous membranes. That's all that lung tissue, that metal tissue is built upon the stomach substance around the body. And it has different forms, but it's still the same idea. And so as you walk around the spherical flow, you just see how the body is built, one step at a time.
Yes. I have another question about your book. Um, there you also said that the really we would only have 6 meridians, which would be the Shaoyin, Taiyang, Shaoyang, Juyin, Taiyin, and Yangming. How can this concept fit here?
Let me bring in another video, another picture here.
Okay. That these 12 meridians
Do you see
would
this, by the way?
ultimately would be 6. I'm still seeing the previous slide.
Okay. Let me see if I can trick the system here. Can you see this?
Yes, yes, yes.
This is in Spanish.
It's okay. Mm-hmm.
So as you go around the sphere, you realize that the opposite meridians, like the polar opposites, form the 6 divisions. I didn't see that when I first saw the spherical pattern. I didn't see that. I showed it to another acupuncturist, and the other acupuncturist said, "This is interesting. The polar opposites here are the 6 divisions." And I said, "What?" "Yeah, I can see the 6 divisions here." And then that just really took this to another level. When you're able to integrate the 6 divisions, or the meridians of the 6 divisions with the meridians of the 6 elements, and make it harmoniously blend into one pattern, you got it. And so you basically have 6 meridians here, because and um, heart and kidney form one meridian. Kidney flows up, connects into the heart, and the heart flows out to the little finger. It's one meridian. But then why is one half of the meridian so different from the other half?
Yeah.
And you begin to see in this spherical structure that there's like a polar opposite, and they're different, and they're separated, and between them are all of the other meridians. Like, to really get from heart to kidney, you have to go through all of the other meridians to get there. And that's one of the beauties of how the body is structured with meridians, is that one meridian, it becomes reflected upon itself, and in order to communicate, in order to develop, it has to interact with all of the other meridians. It's forced. It can't be alone. Just can't say this is one little meridian independent of all the rest. The structure is built in such a way that in order for that one long meridian, Xiao Yin, to function, it has to relate with all the other meridians. And that's just ultimate wisdom of spirit to create that.
Yes.